That is excessive amount of books behind you, but we'll make do.
This is my life. We call it the
I
engine
I
room.
do. I know. Well,
Like,
it's funny while I was waiting for you to come on, I mean, one of the perks and of this, what I do sometimes I do talk to a lot of authors. In this case, Philip Lopate is going to come on for, I've not talked to him before. So, and he has this new book that just came out, I think.
oh, I hadn't seen it. I'm doing an event for another book, a collection of pieces about Freud with Philip next week. So
Oh, is that
that's,
right?
yeah, my life with art house cinema.
Yeah.
Uh,
And already I've just started it because I was just getting on it, and I was thinking what I have to do is email him or email his publicist immediately and just get it in the calendar, because this way I know that I have a deadline, self-imposed or otherwise. But is it the well, first of all, very nice to meet you.
pleasure to
Um,
be here.
After having read a fair amount of your work over the years, and so it's and kind of a fun for to meet you and to talk about your essay. Um, is it fair to call all that happiness is some words on what matters an essay? Because
Yeah, it's
it's
what I do, and it's
yeah,
a 62-page book, so I think you can call it an essay. Is a
okay.
good description of it. It began life as a commencement address at McGill University. Then it was
Oh,
it.
up in Canada. Are you Canadian? I forget.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
Canadian. I'm from Montreal. I went to McGill,
Oh,
uh,
very
and
good.
and then it a couple of op-eds adhered to it, and then my publisher thought, well, this is a little book that a good book for graduates, and that was the evolution of the.
Oh, perfect. I see that. Hence the timing and everything else. Very good. Yeah. Well, and I was meant just to say, I think you're coming up to pretty soon 40 years at the New Yorker.
Yeah, it'll be, yeah, next year it'll be 40 years.
Is that a record for them, or do you know?
No, I don't think so. When I started at the New Yorker, I started as a writer and an editor. And one of the two of the people I edited were Whitney Balliet, who had been there since the late 40s. So he had been done for at least 40 years. And Brendan Gill, who was even more veteran than that, because Brendan had started
Oh
in
my
the
God.
and was still writing in the 80s. He did 50 years and brilliantly. And John Updike,
Yeah.
we actually celebrated he started writing for the magazine in 1954, and we celebrated his 50th anniversary in 2004.
Wow. But kind of as a right. I guess he considered staff? Is there
He
anything?
always had, he was a staff writer for a while at the beginning, first 5 years of his career. He wrote Talk of the Town, and he did that. I don't know exactly, because New Yorker contractual questions are always clouded in mystery, but he certainly was a lifer. He wrote more book reviews than any other author, and
Wow.
he was a hero of mine, my
Yeah.
primary. And I still remember that lunch to celebrate his 50th anniversary. And David Remnick, who was the editor by that,
Mhm.
gave him an inspired gift. He just gave him a bottle of Armagnac from 1954 and a huge sheaf of beautiful foolscap paper for the next 50 years of work. I always thought that was wonderful. I hope they'll do that for me uh, when I hit 40
You
years next
you
year.
deserve it. You definitely deserve that. And yeah, for some almost arbitrary, I don't know what it was, but I just used to, when I was like in my 20s, I started reading Updike, for instance, and don't know why, some basically secular Jewish kid growing up in New York City was as interested in a novelist like him, but I really did love it. Maybe it was
Where did you
exotic,
grow up?
almost like
Where did you grow up in New York?
on the mean streets of Forest Hills.
The meanest streets with Tudor fronts, with all those mock Tudor fronts.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, I grew up in a Tudor house.
Tudor
Yeah.
district, right,
Yeah, yeah. And but not in the gardens, but
right.
closer to the boulevard, not by the tennis stadium, but kind of closer to Kew Gardens, and it was still shrouded in the legend of um um what was her name again? You'll remember it'll come to me in a minute. But the young woman, of course, was killed getting home late, and created. Um, she had an Italian name.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh,
You
that
know, I'm referring.
it's like Marie Capanazzo or
I
something.
bring this up all the time. I don't know why I'm blanking on it at the moment. Probably because I'm talking to you about it. But down the street in Kew Gardens, where she was walking home late one night, was murdered by
And
a. And then it became this whole story about how
response
incensed.
to her cries and all of that, which I think later turned out to be not the case, right?
That's correct. As a matter of fact, another really beautiful thing. There was a documentary which her younger brother what participated in, and he tells the story. It's an astounding documentary called the Dog,
Uh-huh. Huh.
if I'm not mistaken. And it's he retells the story and how I really didn't mean to get this far afield, so
No, it's
forgive
fine.
forgive me, but he ended up because of buying it himself as a young man, buying into the sort of the insensitivity of New Yorkers and not being involved, right? That was the whole
Right.
sort of
People
way
shut
that it
their
was,
doors and didn't come to her aid. Yeah.
which turned out not to be the case, as you said. And but that he actually volunteered and went to Vietnam because
Oh,
he felt like he needed to do something selfless, and he lost within days of his being there. I may be exaggerating slightly, but only slightly. He lost his legs
oh my God.
in a horrible, horrible incident. But as far as I know, he's still alive. And I got to sit with him and the filmmaker, and it was just this incredible experience. So I'll try to send it to you, this conversation we
Yeah.
had, because it
Why
is a high point of doing this, to be honest.
can't we think of her name? I know exactly who you mean. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this is where my editing comes in handy. Anyway, but it was a joy to read what you're. I guess I couldn't agree more with the thesis that of your essay, which essentially, if you come down to a couple of words, would be accomplishment over achievement. Right? Is it?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm aware, having talked to a lot of people now about it, that that distinction seems a little opaque to a lot of people because they say, aren't they the same thing? I've always thought of them as the same thing. So it's a slightly idiosyncratic usage of my own, but I think
Hmm.
it's like many idiosyncratic usages. I think it has power
Hmm.
because it tries to distinguish between all the things we're driven to do by outer rewards against the things we love to do from an inner sense of fulfillment. And that for me is the greatest divide in life, or one of the great divides in life. And one of them, the tyranny of achievement, leads to frustration and late in life exasperation and sense of inadequacy. And the other, the path of accomplishment, leads, if not to happiness, at least it leads towards happiness. It's the way that we experience all of those positive things, absorption, what psychologists sometimes call the flow, kind of the vernacular form of the force that illuminates our lives. And raising two kids here in New York City, I was acutely aware that they were being driven all the time by the tyranny of achievement. That's what the school, they went to a wonderful school, and I'm glad they did, but that's what the school emphasized. That's what the competitive parents emphasized, all those helicopter parents and tiger mom parents and all of that. They were driven towards achievement. And there's something empty about achievement. And when I thought, I looked at the things that were really giving them a sense of meaning, they were my son at the age of 12 learning how to do card tricks, or my daughter getting enamored of reading, of poetry. Those are the things that give real meaning to our lives. And think that they are accomplishments. They're all the things we do, as I say, for the love of it. And even if they're trivial, even if they never become the ground of our own vocation, nonetheless, they are the foundation of our sense of the possibility of fulfillment.
Mm. So it's almost, I mean, there are certainly those who are fortunate enough, I guess, to find that, you give a prime example, personal example of picking up the guitar as I
Yep.
did myself. In fact, I was going to bring it up here and leave it out here, but I forgot to do it.
Look what I do when I'm
Oh,
when
yeah.
I'm talking to people. I come out and I have my guitar. This is not the
Nice.
same guitar 50 years later, 60 years later, but it's, those are the same three chords that I learned over two laborious weeks at the age of 12. A C, a G, a D, a G, and a C. And
Yeah.
that was the foundation, exactly as you're saying, and I'm delighted to hear that it was yours too.
for
of
sure.
my sense of the possibility of accomplishment.
Yeah, and it took years and years to interestingly what by the way, what is the manufacturer? What is the what kind of guitar is that? I
Well,
didn't get
this
to
one
see
is
that.
my son's. It's a good guitar. It's a Taylor. My
Oh, it's a
son
Taylor. Yeah, sure.
went on to become a real guitarist, an incredibly skilled guitarist, and so he left. If I spun the camera around, you would see he left when he went off to graduate school. He left his 6 guitars. He took 2 with him,
Oh,
but
wow.
you know how
So you,
guitarists are. They have to have a different guitar for every
yeah.
approach. So
Oh, believe me.
he left his guitars. You can probably see it if I turn my camera a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You can see 2 more in the corner.
Sure.
He left them saying, Dad, you can play them whenever you want, but just don't touch them. So
Well, how do you do that?
well, that's what guitar players are like. They want to be
Uh,
serious. They don't want you touching their guitars.
I
Anyway,
understand.
that was for me, and I'm not a guitar player. My boy is, but I'm not a guitar player. But I love playing guitar, and
Sure.
if one thing that fuels what I do, I think, well, which is writing, it's as you can see, it's having guitars around me. They're not only a siphon of nervous energy, which is a positive thing, but they're, as I say, the pedestal, the platform, which makes everything else possible. And I think that's a very powerful thing in life, that our secondary passions fuel our primary vocations.
Well, could be an example for you because I think I was taking guitar lessons first at summer camp up in the Catskills in the 70s, and then my dad driving me out to Great Neck every other week to get private jazz guitar lessons, and
Oh,
then
wow.
trying to make a go of it myself, like your son. But it was always something that I struggled, like in terms of where to fit it with and what do I want to do? Do I feel adequate enough as a musician? All these things. And honestly, straight through to into my 50s and till the pandemic, where I had been neglecting playing for so long. And then when we were in that lockdown period, you probably remember, and stuck inside for weeks and months,
Six
that
months.
I
Yeah.
picked it up. I picked it up with a fervor, and this time, Adam, it was, you know, a very different approach to it because I never felt, well, I'm going to go out and be a rock musician, It was, but at the same time, not only did I pick it up with it, it meant something different to me, but I felt like I could actually have a goal, a personal goal with it, which was to be get to a professional level with it. Like knowing that, well, I could do that. I never quite made that connection before. I could be professional, have a professional level work towards that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be a professional guitar player.
Right. That's exactly the
And it
point.
was really liberating.
Absolutely. By the way, who's your favorite jazz guitarist? I love jazz guitar. I'm always curious.
I don't, it's funny. I don't think I have a favorite jazz guitarist, but I guess I would say Django, because
Oh my God.
my
I
mom.
wanted the son I was telling you about, who is a guitar player, um, is I wanted to call him Django. His name is Luke, but his
Oh,
mom
oh,
vetoed Django as a name, though I think it's a fantastic name. And Django Reinhardt is my favorite guitar player.
oh,
And
nice.
I managed to communicate, because we lived in France for many years. I managed to communicate the bug to my son Luke, jazz manouche, as they call it, which, as you know, has its completely independent system of guitar fingering, because Django Reinhardt, we're going far afield here, but I love it, only had 3 fingers, right? So we had
Right,
to
right, yeah.
new ways of forming chords. But
And of
yeah,
course, we know that also um, Jerry Garcia had four or three, four
that's
and a half or something. So
That's right. And Joni Mitchell had childhood polio and couldn't form bar chords, and therefore had
right,
to invent this whole system of open tunings, which give her music its incredible resonance and variety. I think she has like 15 different open tunings. So
yeah,
that's a beautiful example. And when Joni Mitchell started doing the open tunings, it wasn't in response to a demand from a professor. It was a response. It was a way of her carpentering her own consciousness, right? That was what she was stuck with. And for the sheer joy of it, she found a totally new way of playing guitar. That's accomplishment, right? That's accomplishment.
yeah,
Now, Joni went on to fulfill herself as a professional musician, then went on to become, as everyone who knows her tells me, incredibly embittered about the life of a professional musician, and only recently seems to have come back and been astonished that people adore and remember her. But that's a perfect model of accomplishment, is Joni Mitchell discovering this system of open tunings uh, out of the needs of her hands and the desires of her soul. That's a core accomplishment in my scheme of things. And it's not something that you would learn at school.
Yeah, well, I mean, the someone's relationship with their passions could be very different if they sort of took the approach that you're, in a way, recommending in the essay, right? Like most people just cast it out, like, and they reject that part of themselves because they don't know how to make it fit because of the maybe the wrong-headed lessons they got about achievement.
Yeah, exactly. And we not only do we tend to raise our kids so that that's pushed to the margins by all those tiger moms and helicopter parents, but we patronize older people when they attempt it. You know, it's one of the funny
Oh,
things about publishing a book is you always learn about the meanings of the book after you've written it from the responses of readers, and which always surprise you. I wrote a book called Paris to the Moon almost 25 years ago, which was an account of my family's life in Paris. But countless people have come up to me since and said, we used that as our kind of guidebook when we went to Paris. And I thought, that was never the intention, but clearly having a kind of personal map of the city was valuable to people. The same way with this book, All That Happiness Is. I wrote it with graduates, particularly in mind, as a gift you could give to graduates to tell them, de-stress, follow your joy, everything will be okay. But
yeah.
so many retired people have come up to me as I've been out selling the book to say it was really inspiring for them to think about late in life learning, right? That all of the things that people do when they no longer are doing their primary vocation, everything from batik to haiku to origami to boxing, in my case, I'm not retired yet, but that's my passion in my 60s.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
that those things are not things we should condescend to. We should not
Hmm.
patronize, say, oh, those are hobbies for old people. Those are ways of re-entering that zone of absorption of the flow that is all that happiness is. And I think that we have to stop the practice of deprecating those kinds of activities as mere hobbies. That's dynamite in your hands. That's the way you extend your life. You keep your cognition alive. You find meaning, which is all we live for, through those things. So it's not only true about our kids, it's in a sense even more true about our parents or the grandparents we shortly will be.
uh, Talking to Adam Gopnik about this essay, All That Happiness Is, Some Words on What Matters. And it's the name of the imprint is Liveright. Is that what it's called?
Liveright, yeah,
Live Right. Live Right.
division.
That makes more sense.
It's the division. It's the literary division of Norton.
Norton,
Right.
W. Norton. Yes. And is this the first time you've like published an essay and like kind of bound and mass
Yeah,
produced?
it's the first little book I've done of that kind. I wrote a book about Darwin and Lincoln about a decade ago called Angels and Ages, a short book about Lincoln, Darwin, and modern life. A title I thought was perfectly ironic because it was kind of
Hmm.
absurd, but nobody saw that I was being ironic. They thought it was meant to be a short book about Lincoln, Darwin, and modern life, which it was. That was
Right.
a short book. This is a really short book. This is, as you say, a bound essay, All That Happiness Is. And yes, it is the first book of this dimension I've published. I think it's probably a relief to my readers, if there are any, because my last few books have been immense, not to say gigantic, and my next book promises to be 400 pages. But this one was sort of the condensation, the distillation. You know, it's when you're cooking. Cooking is my other great passion, along with
Boxing and cooking
boxing and
and
cooking,
guitar.
is you reduce the sauce, right? And the great chefs know how to reduce the sauce. Well, this is the reduced sauce. My previous
I
book,
like that.
The Real Work, which was all about learning how to master things and was a collection of essays, really, some of them from the New Yorker, many freshly harvested. Uh, but this is the reduced essence of the lessons of that book.
Well, we know since we have the opportunity to, you have reduced it for the book, but here I have something of an opportunity to I don't know what the opposite of reducing, but I guess increasing on some level, a little bit of information. So when you were this young boy, young man, young teenager, I
Albino
suppose,
boy,
and
albino
you
boy.
you you picked up the guitar, you're teaching yourself some Beatles, much sounds very familiar to me since I think the first good Beatles song I learned from my counselor who taught me was Norwegian Wood or something like that.
Yeah.
And um what were you gonna play Norwegian Wood?
Yeah, I was going
Now I
to.
wish I had brought the guitar up for real. I would have yeah, I would have then it went quickly into Blackbird, which, you
Oh,
know, we're getting
I don't know if you can hear that.
I can. I think we'll have to get together and play together
To
at
get
some
together.
point.
But anyway, I'm just demonstrating that
Yeah.
that world, I learned two chords, which I'm sure you did too, Adam. The simplest song in the Beatles songbook was Rain, a very obscure
Yeah.
Beatles song. But I
Right.
wanted to learn it because it was two chords. It was a D and a G, right? When the rain comes, they run and hide their heads. They might as well be that. Just two chords, right? Widely spaced. So I thought that I can learn. It took me 2 weeks to master it, but I
Yep.
did finally. It's the foundation of everything I've ever accomplished
It's
in my.
amazing. Yeah, an amazing thing. I didn't do that. I had somebody showing me where to put my hands and, which fingers to strum and, which strings not to strum. And, so I had that.
It's
And
so
I
hard, right, Adam? When you start it, it seems
yeah,
impossible. Right?
yeah. It's always
20,
the hardest thing to get people over as even as somebody who teaches occasionally guitar to others, like to get them over the hump and give them. And I realized at a certain point, and this is also not necessarily in your essay, but that really I wasn't teaching guitar so much as I was a sense of confidence.
yeah, that's well said. Yeah, but that's
Maybe it is related.
not explicitly in the essay, but that's my implicit point, right? It's exactly from the foundation of accomplishment, our ability to pursue a passion and persevere in it,
Hmm.
right? That's the point. Even though your fingers are aching and the strings are buzzing, and the idea of making a bar chord, right, where you place your index finger right across it, seems utterly impossible. But you persevere and you hear music. You hear music, and for the
Right.
first time in your life, you're making the music you love. For me, it's still one of the greatest highs in the world. And you can't believe that these simple, difficult physical shapes are the physical instantiation of this ethereal experience. I still get shivers when I think about it, no
I
matter how skilled a musician I am.
I really appreciate your passion and your enthusiasm as you talk about it. I really do. And when did I suppose your literary interests, or when did this enter into your your life and the choice to go in that direction?
I always wanted to be a writer.
You did?
Yeah, from the age of 6 or 7, I read,
Really?
yeah, the Thurber Carnival, wonderful anthology, the writing of James Thurber. And there
Hmm.
was something about the tone, the sound of that writing that was both comic and sad and instructive and resigned. I just adored. And I turned to the front of the book and realized all of it had been published in the New Yorker. And I thought, oh, that's a good place. That's a good place to go. But I always wanted to be a writer. And I found when I was in a kid, around the same time, that I was much more effective on the page than I was in person. I could write a letter to my parents protesting injustice. I could write to letters to girls much more effectively than I could, true to this day, much more effectively than I could write, and I could speak, kind of a Cyrano phenomenon. So I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a songwriter very much. I wanted to. I wrote the college show, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to be Stephen Sondheim, only more commercial. And when I got to New York, I found that I had written a musical about the life of Vladimir Tatlin, who was the great Russian constructivist architect, and I thought I was 30 minutes from Broadway with a show about Vladimir Tatlin, not so. And then I started writing. I would write a mini essay every week, and I would go to the old New Yorker offices where I eventually had an office of my own, slip it under the door and wait for it to come back. And I did this
Wow.
for 6 years and eventually got in.
Amazing story. Well, just based on what we're talking about, of course, you could still write a Broadway musical.
I
I
have I
mean,
have actually, Adam. I wrote a musical. It didn't get to Broadway, but it was
okay.
Broadway bound, called Our Table with the great Broadway composer David Shire, and you can find it on Spotify. It's my proudest accomplishment. Our Table. We have an original cast recording with Melissa Errico and Constantine Maroulis, great theater singers. And it's, as I say, you can find it on Spotify.
Well, I'll be listening to it since I do have an account, but I got it for the audiobooks.
Of course.
But um, well, this has been an incredible pleasure. I also will recommend you. I will put it. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. But I wanted to. I'll send you. I work. My gig is I work at a music radio station in the Hudson Valley. That's
Oh,
where
well,
I'm. And so I I don't know. I think my experience definitely is a direct sort of uh example of what your essay talks about. It took
yeah,
me a long time to find that balance, that you know that being
we
okay with my accomplishment rather over what I've achieved.
we all struggle with it all our lives, and it's my
Yeah,
son is an extraordinary young man, is struggling with it now, figuring out what's the role of music in his life. Can you make a living as a musician? Very hard to do now, right?
exactly. Yeah, right.
Never, I always say it's never been easier to be an artist and never been harder to be a professional artist. You
That's
can
right.
record, release, millions of people presumably can connect with you, but to make money doing it, it's incredibly difficult now. It's true about writing, true about music, true about the visual arts. It's a complicated time.
Um, Thank you, Adam. All that happiness is some words on what matters, published by Liveright, currently available, obviously makes the ideal gift for someone who is graduating and
We've
trying to figure out what's next, what to do.
chosen, I'm not too modest to say or too anti-egotistical to say, by Oprah as the number one book for graduates. So if Oprah recommends it, you can't miss.
She's got a pretty good track record, Adam,
She does.
right?
Exactly.
Not a bad person to have on your team of
Oh, exactly.
advocates anyway.
Yeah, good.
And then I reckon I'm gonna recommend this to you then. So
Philip Lopate's book. Well, as I
you're gonna
said,
talk to Philip, tell him that he's gonna be talking to some nice guitar player up in the Hudson Valley in a couple of weeks or so.
will do. Will
All
do.
right. All righty.
Pleasure talking to you, Adam.
Same here.
All right. Take
All right. Have
care.
a good day. You too. Bye.